Hey everybody, welcome to Startup Talk. I'm John Bradley Jackson. You can call me JJ. We're broadcasting from Cal State Fullerton's Titan Radio. We are a 24/7 channel that broadcasts all over the world, and I'm very conscious of that. So I wanted to say hello to the people in Nigeria today. I occasionally find myself slowing down and thinking, well, do the people in Nigeria know where Cal State Fullerton is? Well, probably not. But the topic, I think, is interest to many people. So we're a show all about startups and what it means to be the founder of a company and how we grow and pivot and bounce and fail and succeed. The Cal State Fullerton has a entrepreneurship program of which I'm a professor in. I also manage two incubators where we work with young startups and coach them to go forward. Additionally, I'm the founder of Titan Angels, which is a seed investment fund, and we invest in small startups. My background is Silicon Valley, marketing and sales executive, as well as Wall Street, and this is kind of my third career. You can follow Cal State Fullerton at www.fullerton.edu and then do a search for the Center for Entrepreneurship. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And alternatively, you can follow me, John Bradley Jackson, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all sorts of other places. Our guest today is Andrew Ninh, who's the co-founder and the CEO of DocBot. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So DocBot develops real-time artificial intelligence-driven software, and the primary market today is the world of colonoscopy. And for our listeners, we're going to define a lot of things, but let's start up with Andrew. How the heck did all this start?
Yeah. I've always wanted to be involved with the life sciences. When I was growing up, wanted to get into life science research. That's what my family had been doing for hundreds of years, so it's kind of continuing the family tradition. Originally planned on going into academia, but everything really changed around the time when I graduated high school. My lung had collapsed, so my lung literally popped. I was breathing on one lung, and I was in the hospital and the ICU for about 7 days. Missed my high school graduation, although they broadcasted that live to my ICU bed, so that was really fun. But during this time, I really got my real-life healthcare experience, and that kind of opened my eyes to where we are in healthcare today and sort of where people hope healthcare to be in the future. And there's this huge gap where the fundamentals just are not there today. So I had a consistent experience of stories of nurses and doctors telling me they absolutely hate their computers. Those computers were dangerous to patients. They spent all their time with documentation, charting, doing paperwork instead of seeing patients. And I think that's not something as a patient that you really think about, but it's not something that you want to hear either. So I think that's what got me interested in getting into this area.
Now, what happened with your lung? Why did it pop or collapse?
That's a great question, and nobody knows.
Okay.
We have all this data around us today, and nobody knows why. It's called a spontaneous pneumothorax because they don't know why it happens. But they suspect that in very tall people, so I'm 6'3", I'm very thin, with tall people, that tends to happen to them a lot. And that's the population health guess that we have today.
Yeah. And I presume you were in the hospital, you said, for a week?
Yep.
Yeah. It was life-threatening?
There have been people who have died for not going into the hospital. Mm-hmm. And the actual treatment was pretty intense. Like, they would have to do an incision, drain my lung. At night, alarms would go off at night because my heart rate went too low. But then the nurses came in and said, oh, just ignore that. We've learned to ignore it. And so you have all these false alarms that were happening at night. From the time when I entered, actually I went to another hospital, Orange Coast Memorial, I was 17 and a half. And they said, "You're actually a pediatric patient then. We got to transport you all the way to Children's Hospital of Orange County." So they drove me all the way up across Orange County. And there I was in the ICU bed. It took about 2 days from when I was admitted to when I was actually treated. And those were the longest 2 days of my life. I remember because you did nothing on the bed. I was in pain. And it's like I wake up, see another doctor. He greets me, don't know what's happening, go back to sleep. And that's
Wow.
the theme of those 2 days.
Wow. So DocBot has focused in on colonoscopies and assisting the docs who perform that procedure. What's the problem that's at play here?
Yeah, so very different from the reason why I was admitted to the hospital. I started my company immediately thereafter, and eventually had co-founders join me, Tyler, who was from high school with me, and eventually we met Dr. William Carnes, who did not go to high school with us. He was a physician of 30 years, gastroenterologist, and I think most importantly, this was a problem that found us. We didn't go out looking for a problem. He educated myself and Tyler because we're still 20s. We didn't really know what a colonoscopy was. I knew that my father had one, and they removed things called polyps. It's the only way today to truly prevent colon cancer, and it's a procedure that everybody has to have, no matter where you are, what age you are. Well, you have to start screening when you hit 50, but we all have to get one. Doesn't matter your demographics. But it's a procedure where the physician inserts a camera and they're looking for colon polyps. And the colon has a very large surface area and a lot of different topologies. It's not a narrow tube. So because of that, it's very easy to miss lesions. Actually, since in the last 10 years, we've discovered that flat lesions can be precancerous. And so with high definition cameras, we're seeing subtle lesions that we're not seeing before. And so we believe that with AI, we can bring everybody to the highest detection rates possible.
Right. So some simple questions. So how long is a typical colon?
It's a little over 60 centimeters.
Okay. Is that all? 60 centimeters long?
Yeah, so it curves around your body.
Okay.
So we typically divide into 3 segments.
Right.
And there's different curves, flexures, and there's these folds that you basically have to look kind of behind them in areas like that. And it's a very common procedure. It's a very high demand procedure. So the volume of people coming in is very high. So because of that, the time it takes to do a colonoscopy has the societies have identified that physicians should spend at least 6 minutes on withdrawal, so on the going backwards with the scope to really inspect. A lot of people I'm seeing in the community are doing this in about 3 minutes because of the sheer volume. And so there's not only a problem of demand, it's a problem of time of inspection. And we believe that with AI, that's an extra set of eyes so you don't miss anything.
Right. So the polyps could be as simple as a spot or a flat lesion that's on the colon to, I guess the term is adenoma, and that's a polyp that is formed and is potentially risky then, correct?
Exactly. So there's many lesions we can find in the colon, which I guess comes down to why every colon's different. When it comes down to it, every time you're in,
I find
it's a
that
different
strangely comforting, but go ahead.
So everyone's unique, and there's the most commonly found lesion is the adenoma, which is the precancerous precursor to colon cancer. If when not removed, that eventually will turn into colon cancer. But there's several other lesions that you'll find, I'm sure a lot of listeners may have inflammatory bowel disease. 1 in 300 patients have that. It severely affects the colon. Other lesions found include hyperplastic lesions, inflammatory lesions, normal mucosa that's just kind of bumpy. As physicians, they can't tell, so they're removing everything today, and depending on pathology to define what level of precancer or benign this lesion is.
Okay. And so the tumor, and let's presume that it is cancerous, and it's in the colon, of course that's a bad thing and needs to be removed. But am I correct? The possible significant impact to mortality would be if it grows outside the colon? Am I correct?
Typically, yes. So it's when an adenoma becomes a cancer, there's a chance it could metastasize, which is like stage 4, where it will
go to your lymph nodes,
yes,
your liver,
exactly.
your brain,
yes.
in fact, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So many people, when they're diagnosed with colon cancer, may have symptoms like cancers elsewhere or blood in the stool. And not to scare anybody that blood in the stool always means that, but oftentimes people see blood in their stool, then get some kind of screening exam. You should definitely do it proactively and get it at 50 to proactively prevent rather than reactively going after symptoms.
Right. And so the reason I bring that up is that if you're not getting a colonoscopy and getting screened, and then the symptoms manifest themselves, and the colon cancer has metastasized and spread throughout your body, the likelihood that you're going to survive actually plummets.
Yes.
Yeah, sad but true. Okay. So is there a particular type of person who gets colon cancer, or is it indiscriminate?
Everybody is at average risk. There's not one person out there that is at lower risk for colon cancer. There's certainly people who are at higher risk of colon cancer. So many patients are completely, they don't know that they're at a genetic disposition for colon polyps. So many people on their first screening colonoscopy are discovered to have 20 polyps. And those numbers actually are not insignificant. So there's many genetic hereditary colon polyp syndrome patients, polyposis syndrome patients out there.
Okay. So if you do a colonoscopy, you're going to hopefully find the polyps early, remove them as necessary, right?
Yes.
And so that greatly reduces the risk of developing colon cancer.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the current docs using the traditional procedures without AI, are they catching everything? Are they finding all the polyps?
That's a good question. It varies a lot. Even in the best physicians, they are missing lesions. That was proven about 8 years ago from a key opinion leader in Indiana University named Doug Rex, who did a tandem colonoscopy trial. Kaiser did a sort of a nationwide polyp study, and they showed that detection rates, which is the colonoscopist batting average, kind of ranged from 7% to the highest is 55%. And this is defined as what fraction of your population have you found at least one adenoma. So if you imagine a colonoscopist might see, just for ease of examples, 100 patients a year, we believe that true prevalence, if you're catching everything, your batting average should be around 60%. Mm-hmm. So 60% is now 100%.
Right.
However, that completely ranges. So there are people who are at 7%. There's some people who somehow are at 70, 80%. And so we don't know what the true prevalence is, but what we know is the average is hovering around 20 to 30%, which is a 50% success rate.
Right. Which ain't so good when you think about it.
No, it's not. Half of physicians are below average.
Yeah.
Just
wow.
As a fact.
So this is where DocBot's AI driven program comes into play. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we're not replacing the physician or really injecting anything new to their workflow because they're so busy already. And quite frankly, they're the experts. They're the guys who, really make the call and remove these lesions. We're just providing a software layer over what they're doing. So they're doing their procedures the same way. There's no impact to the how they're doing the procedure. The difference is we're basically drawing a bounding box. So we'll draw a little square as an alert around areas that we think the physician should take a closer look. So the goal is for them to take a closer look into suspicious areas and then hopefully find more lesions. So with our pilot data so far, we show that certainly is true. The high performers are finding an average of about 15 to 20% more adenomas as a cumulative over a year. However, we're still doing the official clinical trials. We'll hope to have results early next year.
Right, very cool. So with the DocBot software as a service, you're capturing many photos within the colon of many patients, and that's all stored in a database in the cloud. Am I correct?
Yes.
Right? And then, is it true, then the more colonoscopies that use the DocBot solution, the greater the integrity of your database, the more useful it is?
Right, exactly.
Okay, very cool. So the end customer, the patient, is men or women, people that are certainly midlife and older. Could be someone who's younger. You don't know. But the customer is the doctor, the practice, or the hospital.
Exactly. So the facility is currently our business model that we plan on implementing when it's commercially available. The facility, so the hospital or surgery center, will be paying us. But you're right. The real end, the true end customer and the end beneficiary is certainly the patient. So the business models can be, we're very open right now because we're a young startup where we still have time to refine our business model. It could be that we'll have to establish a billing code through a payer. We could be implementing this as a value-based care tool for managed care hospitals, or we could go directly to patients.
Okay. So you're going through the approvals at this time with the FDA?
Yes. We've been in discussion with them for a little over a year.
Okay.
We have a clinical trial plan laid out. We will be executing that immediately, and we hope to submit to the FDA all of our paperwork for approval, or clearance is the right industry term, around May of next year.
And then your best case go-to-market, pursue revenue, how far away is that?
That's Q3 of next year.
Okay.
In the interim, we are building our product development pipeline. So applying what we have for colon, we found this directly applicable to so many other areas, whether it's inflammatory bowel disease in the colon, GI capsules, which are capsules that have cameras inside that people swallow, upper endoscopy with Barrett's esophagus, because everyone has reflux, so we're all at risk for some upper GI conditions. And some of these are presenting as great opportunities now because we can license some of this technology to the equipment manufacturers.
I get it. What's interesting, and a little personal insight from me, is my mother died of colon cancer. She was 83, and she had never had a colonoscopy. And this is 20 years ago. And maybe colonoscopies weren't quite as prevalent then as they are now. But what I do know is my friends and family today, in many cases, have a strong aversion to this procedure. And I was actually doing a little research, and it says, well, there's PrEP. So when one has a colonoscopy, you drink this evil liquid, and then for the next 18 to 12 hours, you sit on the toilet, right?
Yep.
And that's a drag, and the stuff doesn't taste good, the PrEP. And I suppose another issue, there's a lack of awareness about the importance of this. But what's interesting is, additionally, the study said that women felt particularly vulnerable during the procedure. You can see why anybody would feel vulnerable is somebody sticking a camera up your butt,
Yes.
But there's a lot of education yet to be, I think, made in this area.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, let's back up just a second, and so let's talk about you. So what the audience doesn't know is you're a very young CEO, all right?
Yep.
And you're 24
now.
24. I was going to call you 25. I was going to promote you. But let's go back in time. What were you like as a kid? Tell the truth.
Yes. I was an only child, and I was always very, very academic focused. I liked to learn about everything I can. Thankfully, was in Boy Scouts, became an Eagle Scout, so had some exposure to activities that's not reading articles on Wikipedia or CNBC or whatever. And I think I had a lot of different interests, but definitely very much in like just life sciences in general, because I looked up to my uncle and just a lot of people in my family who were involved with just the sciences and medicine. And really, I think it's a really great passion, because it's, in what other areas can you really make that much of an impact on patients' lives? My parents were divorced when I was extremely young, probably 4 or 5. And so after school, I spent a lot of time just at home or with friends. And I think that was, for me, I felt that was a great thing, because I could just do whatever I want. And I think my parents were okay with that, because what I want tended to translate to programming. So I learned to program very young.
What, 10, 12, 14?
I'd say around 12, between 12 and 14.
Okay,
but more seriously in high school.
Okay. All right. And you grew up in Orange County by chance?
Yep, Fountain Valley.
Fountain Valley. Where'd you go to high school?
Fountain Valley High School.
Okay, very cool. All right. At that time, did you see yourself being a businessman, being a scientist, being a programmer? What was your vision of who you might be?
My vision was actually to be an MD, PhD, where I could do research on large troves of data out there. Very quickly, I've learned that those large troves of data are actually covered with huge red tape and bureaucracy and things like that, and it was just impossible for really anyone to get anything done. All the interesting research, and I really learned this from Stephen Wolfram, who created Wolfram Alpha, which I'm sure a lot of college-age kids would know about, because they looked up their math questions on there and it gave them the answers. But one of the interesting things he was able to do was this very interesting anthropology, social science research, where people just plugged in their Facebook profiles into Wolfram Research, and then it created like this map of what their cluster of friends were. And people loved that, and it became viral because people just like to, just connect it with their Facebook and get this data. This was all before like the recent Facebook incidents, of course. But the story was that a lot of these academics went to Stephen Wolfram and said, "God dang it, we've been trying to do this for like 50 years. We can't do it. We need consent from patients to do all this kind of research. But as a company, you could do this." And so I thought about that, and I'm like, well, it's in academia, it's just really tough, hard life, and you don't have the freedom, because there's so much administrative overhead that you have if you just started something on your own. So it wasn't really about starting a company, it was just starting something that, can produce value.
So, unfortunately, you weren't able to go to commencement for high school. You get better, and then what happens to you?
Decide not to go to college.
So that's a pivot. That's a big change.
That was a huge pivot. Yes. Originally, wanted to become an MD, PhD, but I was having like sort of a midlife crisis back in high school when I was just applying. Okay. Because even though I was applying to colleges, and I was even interviewed for med school back in high school, that just wasn't really where my heart was. And the problem was, even though I liked the idea, I saw that everything in that realm was kind of becoming more administrative heavy and less freedom. Mm-hmm. So there was less freedom, and at the same time, the student loan crisis was just going nuts. Mm-hmm. So thankfully, in great colleges like Cal State Fullerton, the rate of increase in education costs hasn't really exploded. Mm-hmm. But if we looked at a lot of private colleges out there, and actually even the big state schools like a UCLA or UC Berkeley, the costs have just it's outpaced healthcare. Like, we think healthcare is the big bad wolf. It's student loans. Yeah. It's terrible.
Right. So
it's not what this podcast is about.
Yeah, it's all right, but it's also about you. So you say, all right, I'm not gonna pursue a degree. So then, what did you do?
I jumped right in. I immediately did all the wrong things. Of course, incorporated the company like the wrong way, and just started building something that I thought people wanted. And then it wasn't until, and this is there's great things and there's terrible things in healthcare. one of the great things is that no one has time for your BS if your product is really not good. Your product has to be like super ready. It has to produce 10x the value that is actually would be accomplished otherwise. So there's no wiggle room for like immature products. You got to know what you're doing from the start. So you got your butt kicked for like 2 years, and then I realized, okay, you kind of have to really build a product around not really just like what people need, but kind of developing like the model and the channel and how it can be used, and immediately show value right when they use it. So that maturity understanding took a very long time.
And so how did you support yourself during that period?
Well, thankfully, because through not going to college,
you didn't have debt.
didn't have debt, exactly. Just stayed home and ate at home as much as I could. I've also had to take other jobs. So one of the things I did almost immediately was go up to Silicon Valley and took a job as a data scientist for a company that exited probably 2 years ago, and learned a lot there too. They were a small growing startup. They were at Series A, Series B. So seeing all that, seeing how a company changes, you learn a lot.
All right, very cool. So let's catch back up with the present. So DocBot is formed. Your friend from high school jumps in.
Mm-hmm.
You got Dr. Carnes who's in. What was it like starting this company up?
Well, none of us knew what we were doing. Okay. So thankfully, we were all experts in our own areas. But we weren't quite experts in growing the company. So I think we learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, but finally we built the right network of mentors and then eventually investors like Titan Angels and our seed investors who really were able to provide me with a lot of guidance in how to build the company. I think most notably, we were incubated out of UC Irvine at the Cove, and through then we met who's one of my probably most impactful mentors today, Peter Crosby, who is a veteran of the medical device industry, was the CEO of a few public companies. And he's at the stage of his life where he wants to help other people grow their companies, including myself, Bill Carnes, and Tyler. And he's been a mentor to all of us.
Right, very cool. It's interesting. You talk about not knowing what to do, and that ambiguity and the fluidity of a startup, I would describe as normal.
Yeah.
And for many startup founders, that's particularly threatening, scary.
It's our advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be my supposition that the successful startup founders are able to greet and actually enjoy the ambiguity.
Absolutely.
And so it favors, I think, certain personality types and dispositions, but that is the normal. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So you're coming together with a team. You're developing your advisors, and now you're doing research about your customers. What were the next steps involved? You had to get money, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing product development and not a lot of time doing corporate development in our early stages. I think that's something.
Explain the difference.
Yes, absolutely. So one is more building the business, and the other is being heads down and building the product. Mm-hmm. And I think there's the hard part for startup founders is knowing when they need to start building and scaling the organization and when they need to really take their hands off of the day-to-day product development. I'm talking from like a founder CEO perspective as opposed to like a founder or chief product officer perspective. So I think we didn't spend enough time in the early stages aggressively building a strategy around raising money. But we spent a lot of time building the product. So the product became very mature, and the company lacked a lot of like the executive talent, and there were a lot of missing pieces needed that we eventually filled the holes eventually.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a quote, and I don't remember the source, is that a typical startup CEO, and that probably means not just pre-revenue, but going through the revenue process, spends up to 70% of his or her time in pursuit of capital and working with investors.
Yes.
Does that feel normal now?
Yeah. So I think because we're still a small company, everyone's doing everything. And basically that translates to it, I have to do every other task that nobody else wants to do. And I think eventually we'll transition to an organization where a lot of my time will be spent with exactly investor relations, raising more capital, because that never ends. And that time is coming soon, yes.
So lean startup methodology tells us that you need to truly understand the problem and your customer before you can do the product development.
Absolutely.
Did you guys interview doctors in practice, hospitals?
Oh, hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was not a day that went by that we didn't talk to a doctor. I think most importantly, Dr. Carnes, being one of our co-founders and a physician of 30 years, he knows what the average clinician really wants. Like when they wake up in the morning, what do they think about? When they're doing scoping and doing all this, what's really on their mind? And that's helped us really refine how we approach the market. So it's pretty interesting seeing how the industry has evolved. When we started, it was us and maybe two other academics. Now you have like 5 companies and another 5 efforts out there worldwide trying to do exactly what we're doing. And it's kind of interesting because when we started, we were the only ones talking about certain problems and applications. And before you know it, everybody started doing the same thing, because I think they've discovered over time that, what they thought was the original problem was not really it.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think an interesting and a really tough aspect of healthcare that people don't really appreciate is the business model. It's very tough, even though better outcomes is better for the patient. How do you build a company around better outcomes? It's really tough. Like, can we really go to and I'm not trying to be super cynical or anything, but these are just the facts of life. It's really tough to go to a clinician and say, with our product, you're going to see way better results for your patients in 1 to 5 years. Even if it's completely true, like you've prevented all the cancers. Being able to prove that out and build a very big venture scale company out of that is incredibly difficult. So the problem is, but our passion is to be able to solve those problems. So how do we package that in the right value proposition and the right features of the product that meet the customer's needs and the needs of the patients, of course, that can drive the adoption very quickly? And how do we develop the right business development and partnering opportunities to be able to accelerate that growth?
So you're pre-revenue today, fair, waiting for the go-ahead from the FDA, yet the marketing has begun. Am I correct?
Not marketing to patients. So we don't market that. A lot of our marketing is actually in the academic publications that come out about our product. So publications saying that, like our ability to identify polyp pathology is over 90% in agreement with the actual pathologist. And a lot of that becomes news within like the GI and the medical circles. And eventually we got featured on CBS for like cool breakthrough technologies. So we're marketing that, yes, we were the first to do this. We are the thought leaders and we will be the market leaders in this industry. But, it's still pending that FDA clearance.
Got it. So, but the press has found out about you.
Yes.
And your competitors know you exist.
Yes, of course.
And then your partners also know about you, right?
Yep.
And these would be like the big medical equipment companies?
Yeah, so the medical equipment companies, pharma companies, even with the large hospital networks, when they vet similar companies to us, they identify that we're the thought leaders, we're the market leaders. And that's because we know what the customer wants, what the GIs what do they want when they're doing the procedure and after the procedure.
Yeah. So we touched on this earlier. So you talked about the business model, and for the audience, I would just characterize that as how are you going to make money?
Right.
So yours is a software as a service model. Tell us about you provide value in exchange for money. What's that going to look like? Or you said earlier there were options.
Yeah. So I think the business model that is the most realistic at the moment is a monthly subscription. So $3,000 per endoscopy room per month. And then we're initially targeting ambulatory surgery centers. Eventually, we may transition to a fee per procedure, but that will be pending things like developing a billing model or a billing code around the product.
Okay. Now, in terms of your competitive advantage, that might have different elements. Do you have patents in process?
Yeah, we have patent applications that are in review.
Okay, right now. And would it be fair to describe you as possibly first to market, or are there competitors similar to yours?
Sure, there are competitors that are kind of in the same stage as us, but in terms of running the actual clinical trials, we believe that, to our knowledge, to this day, we would be the first. So we certainly are aiming to be the first to market.
Okay, so in your
in the U.S., by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's right. So complicated world out there. So the evidence that you're going to be able to offer is once the evidence of success with patients is once you're being used. Now, are you in trials? Are there any pre-revenue type use of your product at this time, or is it too early?
Absolutely. We ran sort of a 2,000 patient pilot in the last year to year and a half, where single centers were using our AI under ethics approval. So it's called IRB, Institutional Review Board. They've allowed these physicians to use our device, a non-cleared medical device, which is our AI. And we are starting a multi-center trial. That will be we have a protocol around that will be closely monitored. That will be starting the next couple of weeks until the end of May.
Now, are you able to talk about your experience to date versus the control group, which would be everyone else?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. So we have some data. We have data measuring a clinician versus his own historic data. We found. In terms of adenoma detection rate, it was an relative improvement of about 10 to 15%. And in terms of the average number of adenomas found, and these were among the highest performers, by the way, with high performers like Dr. Carnes and other physicians at UC Irvine, we found on average they found about 15 to 20% more adenomas in the whole population versus without AI.
That's just amazing. So you're in this startup. What's the most fun about it for you?
I think not to sound corny, but it's definitely the people. I love the team that we're working with, and I think sometimes we're a little too close. But I think that's great because when we get into heated arguments, it doesn't break the company. That's the hardest part for startups, especially in the early stage when they don't have any money. Yeah, that's when the stress can really get to you. And we were at that for like 3 years. And Dr. Carnes is like, he's 60 years old. He doesn't have to be doing this. Tyler, he has his whole life ahead. He can do whatever he wants for any tech company. But, we all stuck together. And I think it's because we really liked working with each other.
Okay, that's very cool. That's a great story to tell. So let me flip it now. In the startup at this stage, what do you hate? What bugs you?
So, I'm a young guy, 24. I think young people like to bite off more than they can chew. So I always want to do more. I want to grow as fast as we can all the time. I'm just like, why can't we do this now? But the reality is because we're in a regulated market, we have a lot of quality procedures in place. Not to say that I hate quality, but I think we're starting to we have to build in a little bit of bureaucracy. So being able to be a nimble startup, but also build the right regulatory compliance structure to be a serious company is really tough, which is why we're hiring a chief operating officer.
Okay, very cool. All right. So if you would describe your company culture right now, what were the words that you would use?
In a way, I feel sometimes we have a little too much fun when we work with each other. It's like we're just really fun, really nice people. And I think what really, the thread that ties us all together is that when I ask everybody, it's like you could be, Mo is one of our engineers, great guy. We love him. He's basically on the founding team effectively. He left a really nice job at Intel, joined our company, and 2 days later we said, or actually 1 day later, we said, we got into Y Combinator, we're moving up to San Francisco. He packed his bags and went up with us. And it's like, everybody is so passionate about it. And the reason why we are is because we're doing something that has a positive impact on human health. And I think that's, if I could, I guess I don't really know how to answer these questions besides the fact that that's just what we like to do. That's what brings us to work and wake up each day.
Okay. Well, I think that's fair. So it's you have your own path and you choose that, and that's beautiful. I didn't hear about money. Are you looking to make not a buttload? That's kind of funny. I would say that. A boatload.
Well, we are
money?
in Colin world. So,
so that's possible too, right? There could be a pot of gold, I suppose.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, we're entrepreneurs. We're up here in California. We're based only in Irvine, but in San Francisco. The West Coast was really built on this gold rush of people coming out to make it big. Yeah. And I think we're here to make a positive impact, but certainly we want to be successful.
Yeah, got it. So your headquarters is in Irvine, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you have representation in the San Francisco Bay Area as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, very cool. So if we had to isolate for you like a personal strength or an attribute, let me call it like a superpower, what do you bring to the table?
I'll try to answer this in a way that doesn't make me sound too full of myself.
Okay.
But I think and I've kind of noticed this when I was a kid. When I was growing up, I tended to overthink things a lot. Mm-hmm. Like I could look at a test question and kind of, I know that that's really the answer they're looking for, but it's
you diagram the sentence.
You can,
right?
You can spend way too much time really thinking. Like, well, technically this can work, but that's not the right, things like that. Yeah. So the non-multiple choice questions were always a pain. But so I think I was able to really cultivate that. And I think it's because I learned how to program at a young age too. I think of everything as like a complex system. So I can look at a problem and really identify all of like the little components, seeing how we can make this successful, and I can kind of easily identify what are the pitfalls. So being able to estimate that, especially from like a project management or a corporate development company building perspective, I think is very important. Because now if you couple that with the right experience, now you can create realistic product development timelines, sales and marketing timelines, and overall reduce risk and with good judgment.
All right, very cool, very cool. So if you're one of our listeners right now, is there a question or a topic that I didn't touch on that you thought I would or wish I would have asked you? That's kind of an open-ended question to you. Is there anything that you'd like to tell the folks in the audience? Or I don't mean to stump you.
Well, I do have a list here of creative questions, and I think my I gotta admit, my favorite one is well, actually, I was at a dinner party about a week ago, and we had a similar thing where the host had a list of interesting questions.
Okay.
And this was all Silicon Valley people, so the questions went way out of hand. And but the reason why was these questions were asked because they didn't want any technical discussions at the dinner table.
Right.
Thank God for that.
Yeah.
But the question was, what was your superpower? So I do have to answer that one. And I got to say, even though this sounds probably a little lame, I would like to be able to go back in time because I want more hours in the day.
Okay, all right.
But also, I think kind of like a Bruce Almighty thing. If you could kind of know what people are thinking and kind of be able to, get the right answers out, that would be a pretty cool superpower too.
Yeah, yeah. So that's and that's not only for the founder of a startup, but a corporate exec and maybe the plumber says there's only so much time in the day. And how do you allocate it, and what's important? What can you say no to as well? I know that's a really, really difficult thing. Another kind of exploratory question would be, is in our incubator where we work with startups and then as an investor in startups at Titan Angels, I've witnessed some manic depression in the startup teams. Have you seen kind of a roller coaster experience, or is that not your world?
Yeah, I can definitely sense it. And among my other startup founder friends, it's really tough because especially as the founder CEO, you really need to take on the brunt of everything so that your team doesn't feel it. And when they do, you definitely have to you got to be that lighthouse, that beacon of strength. And you don't complain to anybody. You just can't because no one really understands except to other startup founders, which is why having communities is so important. But I think that maybe that's actually another so answer the last question. Those were superpowers I wanted to have. But I think this is definitely some kind of benefit that I have now, which is I think I can take it on. I can give me the worst news in the world, and I'll find a way to steer this boat in the right direction, make this company successful.
Right. Okay, got it. So if you and I get together a year from now, tell me what is it going to be like? What have you achieved? What is life like?
A year from now, well, even though we try to forecast a year, it never goes as planned. But if our forecast does go as planned, I would be so much more busy because we'll be in the market. There'll be patients using our product every day. The best news I can say is now we have a definitive measurement that we can tell the general public. If you get a colonoscopy with our AI, we can absolutely guarantee your physician will find this many more lesions. And that's going to be a humongous impact, I think, to just the community in general. I think we'll have so many business development opportunities. I'll have to be answering investor phone calls every day. And I think unfortunately I may be a little bit more detached from the actual nuts and bolts of the product, and because I think I'll be more involved with especially maybe the higher level business development, sales, and marketing. And as an engineer, that's something that's kind of different for me. Even now, I haven't really been in hardcore development of the product. Maybe for I help a little bit in sort of a pseudo CTO kind of capacity. But eventually that's going to have to be handed off.
Yeah, so that's just the consequences of growth and scaling is that you get to grow and scale as well. So how might our audience get a hold of you if they have questions?
Yeah, so our website is www.docbot.co. And my email is Andrew, just my first name, at the domain. So docbot.co, Andrew at docbot.co.
And remind our listeners, now you're looking to bring on more team members in the future,
Yep,
correct?
definitely.
What are those positions?
All sorts of roles. So we're hiring for executive roles, so chief operating officer / VP of operations. Engineers, certainly. We're always wanting to bring on engineers to help build the product further. We're building out our clinical team, our support team. So everywhere.
Very, very cool.
Sales and marketing.
Well, I wanted to thank our guest today, Andrew Ninh, the CEO and founder of DocBot, and to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Please follow us at Cal State Fullerton at fullerton.edu, on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And then my site is johnbradleyjackson.com. Also, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Our guest next week is Paul Wasserman, who was the founder of eBates, and eBates was acquired by Rakuten, which is a Japanese firm. What's interesting about the eBates acquisition is it was a $1 billion acquisition, and it was all cash, which almost never happens. So I'm looking forward to his story. So we'll talk with you folks next week, and take care.